I've collected Spain for a long time, not, shall we say, successfully or profitably or anything like that, but with great interest. And if you collect Spain and if you buy accumulations, you will always find an enormous number of labels and propaganda stamps and so on mixed in the pile of stuff that you got. All countries have issued that sort of stuff, but it seems to me that Spain is unique in the quantity, particularly during the Civil War era in the 1930s. This is a quick look at the what I call the paraphilately of the era, the stamps that are not real legitimate for postage. I'm not sure if that's an actual word or not, but
I like that word.
okay. Then in 1931, in the spring, Alfonso XIII abdicates. He had been sort of a useless figurehead for a long time and had the respect of no one in the country, but he was just there. So they left him there. But there was such growing disrespect and turmoil, particularly among the working class in Spain at the time, that he made a few statements saying, I want things done this way and I want them done that way. And everybody just looked and said, screw you. Who are you? So he left. And he's, of course, as most monarchs will do on leaving, he says, you'll want me back. I warn you, you will want me back. Uh, they didn't ever ask him back. So Spanish politics was very divided at the time. Well, that's more typical of European politics in general, isn't it? I think we're kind of unique in having the two-party system, and maybe it's not even to our advantage to do so. But the parties got together and they decided to work out a constitution and they cobbled something together. The new republic, and that's the kind of government they set up, of course, issued stamps. And the first issues very often had historic figures on them. Here's a sample of three. I won't read the names out there from the 19th century. And what they represent, of course, is the notion that, hey, Spain, we've had republics before. In fact, they had one. And these people were, some of them involved in that republic. I've chosen these examples because these issues, they were issued over a period of about 4 years, are generally spectacularly poorly centered.
It's a general problem with Spanish stamps in general. All the interminable colonial issues with the monarchs on them are just all of them terribly. It's very hard to find a decently centered stamp.
Oh, I didn't know that. Huh, I have a pile of them too. I'll go look. Thank you, Phil. That's good. When I first started collecting, when I'd get a wildly off-centered stamp, I would toss it. Latterly, I find them amusing, and if they're really outrageous, I cherish them. Unfortunately, these are not as wildly as Phil's implying. Sometimes you get these stamps that are like 2/3 missing or something like that. And they're not bisects in that case. The turmoil persisted in Spain, and I'm not going to get into the politics and the Civil War as a historical event. I don't know enough about it, and it's really complex. In any case, they were small revolutions against the government, and three of them, in fact, and they came, surprisingly enough, from the left in Spain, even though the Republic was considerably more left than most governments in Europe at the time, wildly more left, as a matter of fact. In Spain, the army had a tradition of stepping in when they didn't like what was going on. This made the Spanish Civil War, at first, just one more incident in what always happened in Spain. The army doesn't like what the politicians are doing. They step in, they demand corrections, they get their corrections, and they retreat. In this case, that didn't happen. As we all know, the Civil War lasted 3 years. There were three generals who were conceivably to be ultimately the generalissimo of Spain: Sanjurjo, Morla, and Franco. The first two, strangely enough, died in airplane crashes, not shot down by an enemy, just the plane crashed. That was aviation in those days. Franco was left, and he was certainly up to the task in all ways, good and horrific. This is a map of Spain early in the conflict. This is just a few months after the Civil War began. The nationalists, those who were in revolt, quickly took over the West and the South. Many of the troops who were involved in this insurrection came, in fact, from Morocco, and that's why they went to the South. But there was greater sympathy for their point of view on the world, their conservative point of view on the world, than there was in the North and the East, particularly Madrid and Barcelona. We're going to get away from the stamps that were regular issues accepted by the catalogs and so on very quickly. Just to note that the stamps of the Spanish Republic were inscribed República Española, and those of the insurgents were inscribed España. There is a subtle difference there. One is emphasizing the form of the government, what the people have chosen, and the other is sort of referring to the eternal idea of Spain, which, in the opinion of these generals and many millions of other people, has been disregarded by the Republic. In fact, has been trashed. So both sides issued postage, not an enormous amount, really, of considering during this 3-year period. So there were these stamps, but for every stamp that was issued by the governments, or the would-be government in the case of the nationalists, there were scores of propaganda labels, tax issues, local issues, overprint surcharges. As I say, you will find these things if you buy an accumulation of French stamps, of Spanish stamps, by the thousands. Here's an example, and the quote is from the Spanish Philatelic Society. This is just one page that I picked up for years ago. And this shows you the variety of stamps and labels that were being issued at the time. Some of them referred explicitly to the military. Some referred back to the religious conservative traditions of Spain. The one in the middle there, the blue and the black, that's representing, that is from and propaganda for the PUM party. The M in that word means Marxist. There was a very strong element of Marxist thought at this time. There also was, unique to Europe at this time, a still strong anarchistic sentiment. And there actually was, it sounds like an oxymoron, there was an anarchistic union. But there you go. More examples showing stamps in honor of the militia in some cases, appealing for help with children, local issues, stamps that have been habilitado, that is to say, changed in value or changed in purpose, or perhaps useful now for actual postage. There's a tradition everywhere, of course, of local issues. These are just some examples of some that Spain had. Just saying this to say that it was not at this time in Spain that the idea of local issues came about. Scott lists this stamp as the first stamp from the nationalist side in Spain in the 1930s. Well, it is. It was issued for the nationalist area, but it was only useful in the city of Granada. So actually, this stamp is a local issue, even though this catalog and most other catalogs, I checked 3 others, do include it as a regular postage stamp, not a label or something like that. The idea of local issues grew rapidly during the war. They were good for fundraising, they were good for building morale and I guess they just kept people busy. One common theme in non-postal material that will be adhered to an envelope at some point, just like our Christmas seals, is working for some raising money for to fight a disease, or in particular to take care of children. I like this. I won't say I like it. I found this series interesting. This is from Catalonia. The language there is Catalan. That was permitted by the Republic, which was fiercely anti-sectionalism in Spain. But they realized they could only fight, as Abe Lincoln said once during the Civil War, when he was urged to go to war against Britain because they weren't treating American ships well. He said, please, gentlemen, one war at a time. So the Republic allowed all kinds of these things to be issued, but they were not valid for postage in themselves. As in so many situations, stamps will be issued that appeal just to collectors. There was no real aspiration that these things would ever get on envelopes, but they were printed in London and were sold. Overprints with slogans and with exhortations were very common at this time. There are hundreds of stamps that have overprints. Some are recognized, some are not. People were doing this in their backyard and so on. Here are two examples of the slogans you'll see. Viva España, which of course we all know what that means, and Arriba España, which means about the same thing. Spain, stand up. Long live Spain. But for overprints, nothing is more frequent than Franco. The quality of these things, of course, varies greatly. These are two examples of, I think, very well-made products. And these are examples of just, as the grammar school teacher would tell me, needs more effort. As I said before, sometimes these stamps were directed at a particular problem, not just raising a little extra tax money for general purposes. And in this one, these two examples are the crusade against the cold, the winter cold, which, as you can see on the left, the soldiers were suffering through. Whether or not the word crusade was used in the Republic, I don't know, given its religious origin. And the Republic was strongly against the establishment of religion. And in general, sometimes the word just beneficio was used. Here's a cover, not mine. I'd love to have it. This is from Mallorca to Berlin, early in the war, 37. And this is an example of when some of these labels and propaganda stamps and so on actually got on an envelope. If you look through the accumulations of these things that you get, you'll find that 97% are unused. That's generally the case with cinderellas, isn't it? And these are, in a sense, some of them cinderellas, not the tax stamps. I will grant you that, not the ones that explicitly say postal tax. This is an interesting cover, I think. I like the way that the stamps are applied. The 30-cent red stamps are legitimate postage recognized by the nationalist forces. The blue stamp says crusade against unemployment. And there it is there. This is from, as I said, Mallorca to Berlin. I wonder what connection this had with Germany and the eventual involvement of Germany heavily in the Spanish Civil War. To be fair, this is another stamp. This is from the Republican-controlled areas, Catalonia, and this is to New York, with a very fine example of a used propaganda label. In this case, the point of the propaganda is to honor the militia. The militia was the last desperate attempt by the Republic to raise whatever troops they could to fight off the encroaching and soon to be successful nationalist forces. This stamp I could use help on if anybody can tell me what's going on here. It says República Española. That does not at all mean it was really printed by the Republic. It just means someone, some organization, some group somehow wanted this thing to potentially have use in the area controlled by the Spanish Republic. And it's labeled Franquicia Postal, which is an old-fashioned way of getting things mailed. It's the way that most mail was done originally. That is, you wrote a letter, a message of some sort, you found someone to deliver it, and when it was delivered, the person who delivered demanded money from the person who received. That's what this kind of stamp would do. But was it actually used by anyone? I don't know. And the date on there, July 14, 1931. Okay, 31 was the very first weeks of the Spanish Republic. But July 14 doesn't mean anything particular in Spain. Of course, it is Bastille en France. And just quickly as an addenda, I find it hard to talk about this topic without bringing up, of course, the great world-famous painting Guernica by Picasso. I wondered while going through this, in the back of my mind, kept asking myself, does the painting Guernica ever appear on Spanish postage? Because it's hard to imagine Franco allowing that. Franco was in power until 1975. Well, yes, it does appear, but it's in 1981 when Spain is now a constitutional monarchy. This is the stamp and the small souvenir sheet it came on from 1981. Finally, also at this time, I was looking through various catalogs and so on, and the Spanish Civil War was an event of really worldwide importance. The eyes of the world were on it, although most countries swore they would not intervene. And one of those, which made all the difference in the world, was France, which would not intervene. Of course, it shared the only major border with Spain, and it would have been the way for most of the aid to the Republic to get there, but France discouraged that as much as it could. During the war, they did issue this stamp, however, and this is a semi-postal from France raising funds for French people who are repatriated to France, not for Spaniards, but for the French themselves. But these are just the little things I add. And that is that.